Welcome to the Inner Expansion Podcast. I'm your host, Lucinda Gordon-Lennox, and I am here to take you on a journey. I'm sure you have noticed that the world is changing fast. I want to help you experience yourself as your best, most empowered, messy and authentic self, living abundantly, joyfully, and free. Expect regular inspiration, tips, tools, stories, sharing hope, grit, healing and growth, so that I can help you to heal, grow, and move forwards on your pathway to freedom through your own inner expansion. In order that we experience our best life on the outside, it is our inner landscape that requires the attention. So if we can expand our inner world and our capacity for healing on the inside, then we are absolutely on our way. And this is the journey. This is your pathway to freedom. These conversations certainly help me. I hope that they help you too. In this episode, I'm talking about the insane power of surrendering in the face of serious challenge. Using an example from my own life, I demonstrate the beauty and the magic that can occur when we really do hand things over and allow ourselves to live from a higher place of consciousness. I hope you enjoy it. Okay, so today I wanted to talk about something that really changed my life. I've had so many moments that have changed my life, but this one was a really big one, and I wanted to share it with you. It was a few years ago now, and I was in Ibiza. I used to go to Ibiza a lot. I'd even escaped just for a couple of days. And I find it one of the most healing places I've ever been to. I just love it. So I had 5 days in, I think it was August. It was in August, 5 days. My children were with their father. And I went to Ibiza for 5 days. And the idea was I would do 5 days there. Then I was going to hop on a plane, come back to London, pick my children up, and then bring them back to Ibiza for another 5 days where we'd have 5 days together as a family. But it was in that first 5 days that this incredible thing occurred. Now, many of you might have heard of, you might be really familiar with Michael Singer, the author of The Surrender Experiment and The Untethered Soul. So I discovered these two books of his during that first 5 days where I was in Ibiza on my own. And I started to read the Untethered Soul, and I couldn't quite grasp it. So I stopped, and then I picked up The Surrender Experiment, both by him. Now, I could not put that book down. So I love books anyway. I read really fast. I kind of guzzle books. It's been a form of escapism for me since I was really, really little. But I really do guzzle them. But this one in particular, I actually didn't guzzle. I just loved it. I was so immersed in the book. And it talks about, for those of you who don't know, this amazing guy, Michael Singer, who describes himself as a regular American growing up, as a regular American teen. And then, forgive me if I slightly misquote this, but one evening he was at a friend's house, they were having a beer, they were ordering some pizza, just completely normal. And before you know it, he ends up in the middle of a forest, meditating on his own. And that's what he did for a long, long, long time. And what he learned during that time is what he teaches in both books, really. But The Surrender Experiment is a book about his life and how he really approaches his life from a place of surrender. And then in The Untethered Soul, he goes on to describe how to get to that place of surrender, what that place of surrender really is. So I'm reading The Surrender Experiment and I'm absolutely loving it. It's such a good book. If you haven't read it, I cannot recommend it more highly. And I am totally just adoring his life story, just loving reading about it, loving hearing about it. all the twists and turns, and how he shows up to his life from a place of surrender, regardless of what is occurring in his life. It's just incredible. I wish I could do that to the degree that he did it, but I can't. I have other tips and tools, but this is one of them for me that he's given me. But the way he did it with such purity, every life situation that came at him, he made a decision that he would immerse himself in it. He wouldn't run away from anything. He would show up to everything that walked into his life, that came into his life, whether it was a business opportunity, whether it was a wife, whether it was a child, whatever it was. And he would welcome it all in from a place of pure surrender. So I am loving, loving, loving this book. And it gets even better towards the end. I'm not going to ruin it for anyone who hasn't read the book, but it's really surprising and not necessarily what you think is going to happen. So I read that book first, and then once I'd read that and I was absolutely captivated, I barely took a breath before I went on to The Untethered Soul. And when I started The Untethered Soul, having read The Surrender Experiment, suddenly something went click in my system and I understood it. And what he talks about, how we get to that place of surrender, through the eyes of Michael Singer, if you like, is, he asks the question, who are you? Who are you? So I was asking myself, well, who am I? I'm Lucinda. I'm a mother. I'm tall. I'm 5'7". I am a trauma therapist. I'm thinking of writing a book on trauma, because I think back then I was thinking about writing a book on trauma. But the point he makes is, but hang on a second. Who is the you that is able to say those words? Who is the you that is thinking those thoughts? So in other words, if we have a thought, then we cannot be whatever it is that that thought is saying, because we are able to think the thought. Therefore, who we are must be something else, because we're able to think the thought, to see the thought, to hear the thought. Therefore, we must be something separate to that thought. Similarly, we can say the same about feelings. So if we are feeling anxious, let's choose an uncomfortable feeling. We can sometimes, as humans, have a propensity to say, oh, I'm really anxious. But if we just pause and think, well, hang on a second, am I really anxious? Because if I can feel the anxiety, if I can notice it, if I can experience it, then am I actually it? And the answer, of course, is no. If I can experience something, if I can feel something, then I can't be that thing. I must be something separate to that. So if we're not our thoughts, if we're not our feelings, could we be our body? Well, the same really applies. If I can feel my body and I can see my body, I can touch my body, I can experience my body, then I can't actually be my body. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to see it, touch it, feel it, experience it, and do all of those things. So therefore, I must be something different again. So as I'm reading The Untethered Soul, I am beginning to realize that as I step back from my feelings and from my thoughts and from my physical body, I must be something different again to all of those three things. And then I started to understand what he was talking about. So if as humans we're not our thoughts, we're not our feelings, and we're not our physical body because we can experience all of those things, then what are we? What is left? What is remaining? And I think one of the loveliest ways that I do it is I close my eyes and I literally imagine that I'm taking a step back, whatever the I is. We don't quite know what the I is yet, but I'm taking a step back so I can really picture myself, my thoughts, and my emotions. And from that place, wherever that place is, that's where I am I. That is me. So some people might call it consciousness. Some people might call it self with a capital S. I think a lot of different people call it different things. I don't know if it matters what we call it, actually. But the beauty of it is that if we can operate from that place where we remain completely unattached to our thoughts, to our feelings, to our physical body, then it gives us a completely different place where we can sit and we can observe ourselves and our lives without becoming completely enmeshed. And so when we are taking this stance, if you like, from this different place, this seat of consciousness, this seat of observation, we are able to create more space between ourselves and our experiences of ourselves and of the world. And there's nothing more wonderful than a bit of space. Now, I was privileged enough in Ibiza that summer to really experience this in action. Because Michael Singer's whole point in the surrender experiment is that if we can operate from that place of observation, from that seat of consciousness, then everything, from a place of surrender essentially, then everything will actually unfold exactly as it's supposed to. And all we really need to do is to allow our central nervous system to relax, because everything is actually unfolding exactly as it's meant to, and then just be the gentle observer. And I thought to myself, God, I would love to live like that. Oh my God. When I look back over my life of complete and utter chaos in places, complete chaos in places. And when I thought of my everyday, as a mum, as a colleague, as a friend, as a daughter, and the busyness of life and caught up in this and that and the other, and everything just sort of spinning so fast during the day, I thought, God, if I could live from that place of surrender, wow, life would be totally different. It would be incredible. So I did my own little experiment. Let me reframe. I was utterly determined that trip that I was going to give this a go, and and that it was going to work for me, because boy, did I want this so badly. Now, I just wanted to feel that peace that Michael Singer experienced most of his life from living from that place of surrender. So I did a little experiment, and I just every day I would go into meditation and I would get myself into that place. It wasn't even getting myself into that place, because we are already in that place. But it's about being conscious of being in that place of surrender, that seat of consciousness. So in meditation, really observing the thoughts, observing the feelings and the emotions from that place of consciousness, knowing that they are occurring within me, the emotions and the thoughts, but remaining unattached to them and witnessing them. I had this lovely 5 days before I went and picked my children up, where I could really start practicing this and really getting used to what it feels like to live from that place of being unattached to feelings and unattached to thoughts and unattached to my physical body. And I had some time to really play around with it. And what was so beautiful is that I flew back to London, I picked up my children, we flew back to Ibiza. We had a lovely 4 or 5 days together. And then there was a thunderstorm the night before we were due to leave. Now, a thunderstorm in Ibiza in August means that there's going to be one heck of a lot of water coming down on very, very parched soil, land, because Ibiza is essentially a very dry island and it wouldn't have seen rain for months. So to suddenly have that downpour of rain and a lot of rain towards the end of August, that was a lot of water. And one of my fears, one of my enormous fears, anybody who knows me quite well will know this, is a fear of driving in any adverse weather conditions. It's a fear I have. So there I am with two tiny children. There's a thunderstorm. I also have a bit of a fear of getting to airports late. That actually is not quite so strong as it used to be. But here we are, there's a thunderstorm. We're leaving the next morning to get our flight. We have a hire car and I have to drive us to the airport, and it is storming outside. The rain is coming down so thick and fast, and I begin to get the fear. So I put the children to bed. It's bedtime. The rain is still bucketing down. And I remember the Michael Singer stuff. And I think, whoa, if there's a time I need to surrender, it is now. I was filled with fear. How am I going to get us to the airport without sliding through the mud, the rain, in the car? How am I going to do it? I really was very, very, very scared. So as I fell asleep that night, I was really intending to get to that place of surrender, to get to that place of everything's going to work out exactly as it's meant to. Therefore, there is nothing for me to fear or to worry about. So I went to sleep with that intention. Woke up the next morning. It was still raining. My heart sank. I thought, oh no, I've been surrendering this away. Surely that would have stopped the rain. Surely that meant the roads were going to be dry. Surely that meant I was going to be able to drive and there'd be nothing to worry about. This hasn't worked. Da da da. Whew. So, of course, that's not how it works. But in my head, in that moment, that's how I thought it should work. So fast forward a couple of hours. We're all ready to go. The place where we're staying has a dirt track that's on quite a slant downhill, and I have to drive us down it. I am terrified. Get the bags in the car, get the children in the car, say goodbye to the lovely person we were staying with, and off I set. It's still raining. The roads are slippery. It's been raining for probably 12 hours straight by now. I'm scared. As I turn the engine on, I'm like, right, this is it. Now I have to surrender. The car turns on. I turn it in the driveway. I start going down the really, really bumpy dirt track that is now very muddy in the car, and I surrender. I keep coming back to that place in me. I surrender. Whatever's meant to be is meant to be. I surrender. I surrender this fear. I will not sit in this fear. I'm going to let this fear go. I'm handing it over. I'm going back to my seat of consciousness. I'm witnessing the fear, but I am not going to get involved in it. We made it down the dirt track without any problems whatsoever. So once we hit the main road, I'm feeling a little bit more encouraged. And the main road is sort of on a hill, so the water's running off the road quite easily. So there's not much water on the road at all. So it's not too bad. The window wipers are going very, very fast because the rain's still coming down really, really tough. But it's not too bad driving. So we have about 25 minutes or so where the driving really isn't that bad. And then as we near Ibiza town, the road starts to get very flat. And this is where we hit a flood. I'm not kidding you, probably 8 inches of water, maybe a foot of water, maybe more. So the fear starts up again, and I keep coming back to that place of surrender. Come on, Lucinda, back to that place, back to that seat of consciousness. Witness the fear, handing it all over. Everything is working out exactly as it's meant to. I even got to a place where I literally said to myself, if we are meant to die today, then that is what's meant to happen. That is as far as I surrendered that day in that car. So we're driving through the floods. My daughter's tiny. She's sitting in the front seat next to me. And because I'm feeling so much fear and obviously don't want to leak it out into the car. So I'm sitting from this place of consciousness, witnessing my fear. If we're all meant to die, and saying to myself, if we're all meant to die today, we're all meant to die today, then that's how it's meant to be. I'm handing it all over, praying that she's not seeing how flooded it is, and she can't. Luckily, she's too short; she wouldn't be able to see over the side. She was very, very little back then. And then suddenly, as I realised that we are managing to drive through this flood, I suddenly think to myself, "Oh my goodness, we've got 2 suitcases. We're about to arrive at the airport. The car park's covered, but there's this big gap between the car park and the terminal. I've got 2 tiny children, 2 big suitcases, and me. We've got no umbrellas. We've got no raincoats. How am I going to get them into the terminal without us all being utterly drenched?" So this is the next dilemma that's coming in my head. So I'm like, right, back to that seat of consciousness, surrendering the fear, surrendering the worry. Everything is working out exactly as it's meant to. And I come back to that place of consciousness. I witness my fear. I witness my worry. I witness the worried thoughts. And I sit back and I surrender. We enter into the airport car park, and there was this lovely car hire company. I don't know if it still exists, where everything was booked via WhatsApp. And you'd get out of the airport, I get out of the airport, and he would have sent a photo of which bay in the car park the car was in. The key was in a special hiding place, and there was no queuing, there was no nothing. It was just the best car hire service ever. And so I knew that I was going to drop the car off, take a photograph of the bay, and then I was going to have to get the children into the airport terminal with the 2 suitcases without getting them wet. Now, I'd never met the person that I'd been hiring these cars for years in Ibiza. Never met him before, ever. So I'm surrendering away, surrendering the worry about the children getting soaked and the suitcases getting soaked and me getting soaked and sitting on an airplane for 2.5 hours soaked, surrendering all that worry, coming back to that place of consciousness, surrender, surrender, surrender. As I turn and park the car in a parking bay in the airport, I get the children out of the car, thinking surrender, surrender. It's still tipping it down with rain. Surrender, surrender. Suddenly, a man pops up. It's the car hire guy, who I have never met before. And he looks at me and he looks at the kids and he goes, "Hop in the car. I'm going to drive you to the terminal so you don't get wet." And I burst out laughing. I burst out laughing. The children thought I'd gone mad. I couldn't stop laughing. It was relief. It was everything. It was everything. It was, oh my God, Michael Singer, it works. You surrender, everything works out. I just can't believe it. I just can't believe it. So we jumped back in the car, and this amazing man who'd rented us the car, who I'd never met before, who suddenly happened to be there on the day that I was surrendering and not wanting my children to get soaked, was giving us a lift to the terminal so we could stay dry. I literally couldn't believe it. So I feel so blessed to have had that experience, because what that did for me is it really cemented the truth of the wisdom that Michael Singer imparts in his books, because I got to read the books, I got to play around with it, and then I got to really put it into practice in a real life situation that was filling me with utter terror. And I was able to witness it working out in action. So perhaps the message, the wisdom that I want to share today is that there are always alternatives to our logical ways of looking at things, of approaching things, of managing challenges, of taking care of ourselves when we feel triggered, when we feel really fearful. I can look back at myself then and I can be like, wow, back then I was absolutely terrified of driving in adverse weather conditions. I really, really was. I'm actually not so scared of it anymore. But the whole point is that there are so many other ways available. This incredible Michael Singer technique, if you like, is just one of them. That's just one of the ways to go to that seat of consciousness, that place of surrender, and really surrender into the flow of exactly what is happening, safe in the knowledge that when we disengage from the difficult feelings and we disengage from the perpetuating thoughts, calamity thoughts, if you like, when we disengage from all of that, then we really do approach things from a very, very different level of consciousness. And when we do approach challenges from a different level of consciousness, then the outcomes of those challenges are going to be very, very different too. So by all means, go and give this a go. If there's enough information for you to understand it in this podcast, that's fantastic. If you want to read more, pick up the Michael Singer books, but give it a go. Living life, even just practicing little parts of life, little challenges in life, coming back to that seat of awareness, that seat of consciousness, as the witness to our thoughts and the witness to our feelings. Coming back to that seat in whatever situation we are in means that we are approaching whatever is occurring from a very, very different level of consciousness, which means that the outcome will be very, very different to had we been living the event enmeshed in our feelings and our calamity thoughts. Worth having a think about at the very least. I hope you have enjoyed this episode. If you have, and it has helped and inspired you, please do forward it to anyone else you may feel will benefit so that we really can get this incredible wisdom to as many people as possible. And if you would like to, please consider rating this episode and the podcast and leaving a review, as this does help enormously too. You can find more of my work on my website and through Instagram. All the details are available in the show notes. I hope you have a magnificent day, however you are, wherever you are, and regardless of anything you might be going through right now. And remember, you are on the journey. You are absolutely on your pathway to freedom. See you soon.